Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Catholic ReCon Testimonies from Reverts and Converts. I'm your host, Eddie Trask. Please subscribe to this channel to hear testimonies every week and comment and like when you can. This week's guest is Jason Goodman. Another fantastic introduction I got from Dave Fortin. I've mentioned Dave before. Just a great friend, and he happens to know a lot of people that are on fire for the faith. So very privileged, Jason, to have you join me this week. Why don't you take us to the beginning of your journey?
So I hope Dave said good things. I'm kidding.
No,
I'm
no,
sure he did.
he didn't. He was actually very critical of you.
I, as only Dave can be. No, I'm
Exactly.
kidding. That's awesome. He's gonna hear this and be like, "What?
What are
No,
you talking about?
no, I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah. No,
Um,
I didn't give you much of a runway there, but what's so interesting, whether a person is a revert or a convert, um, 9 times out of 10, they'll have some moment in the early childhood that kind of frames the story, or that planted a seed for them, and they have to return to it later, often in their 20s. But where did it all start for you?
well, I was born. No, I'm kidding. I
We're not born.
I was born. I was actually. I'm trailer trash, to be honest. No, I was born. Not born in a. What are those called? Those trailer courts, the mobile homes.
Oh yeah,
I,
yeah.
I was conceived in a mobile home, so I don't know if that is constitutes trailer trash, but no, I'm kidding. Trash for Jesus, we'll put it that way. No, not kidding. I was I would say I was born into a semi-Catholic family. My mom and dad got married right out of high school, like literally graduated high school, had me a year later. Got married, had me a year later, and I'm pretty sure they got married first. But it was my dad who was Protestant. He married a Catholic girl. My mom's name was Joan. She unfortunately died in 2001 from 3 aneurysms she had, which I'll get into that. But he was a Protestant, and I kind of, now that I'm 47 years old, almost 48 years old, it's crazy. I look back and I can kind of piece together, almost like an investigator, where my dad made these decisions and why. And I get it, now as a grown man, uh, a friend of his now that I can say, because he and I are very close. But um, they argued a lot. They yelled a lot. It was very wounding to me looking back, just all the arguing and yelling, and how it kind of, like you said, it framed where I was the rest of my life. I was going to say this later in the talk, but I'll just say it now. It's
Yeah.
interesting how God kind of frames things together for you to use later in life to help you along the way, but Satan also uses things to frame together to help you along the way. Like Screw Tape Letters, and C.S. Lewis says that Satan wants to help you to hell, and uh, he definitely had those moments where I can see where he tried to do that, and anyway, I guess my dad, the arguing was because he wanted her to stay at home and be a homemaker, and she wanted to work outside of the house, which at the time in the 80s, well, early 70s, I would say, or late 70s, rather, that was kind of a thing. The woman stays home, the man works, and now that's kind of been flip flopped in the worldly view, and it's not that the woman's lesser because she works at home. I think that's such a gift. My wife jumped right on that Catholic bandwagon, if you want to call it that, a good thing. She wanted to be a homemaker and a homeschooler mom, and she's amazing. I mean, we've been married almost 19 years, and she's got it down pat. She's like, I'm in the Army, and I'll get to that, but she's the sergeant major in the Army, and I'm the cake eating officer at times. I just kind of go do all the behind the scenes things nobody really knows or cares about, and she's the one directly there in the line of fire. And I don't give her enough props. I should probably do that, but I try to. But yeah, that's where they were at. He wanted her to stay at home, and she wanted to be working, and so she eventually got a job at a local bar, and then she became a manager, and that whole scene. And you can imagine the weekends she's working late at night, and she's getting into trouble and starting to do things she shouldn't, and he's starting to do things he shouldn't out of probably anger for her. And I get it. It's not right, but I get how that all happened. But as a 5 to 9 year old, I see my mom and dad arguing all the time and yelling,
Yeah.
Um, but after she started doing that, we kind of shifted to babysitters, because of their shifts in life and how they worked with their jobs. Um, my dad and mom kind of fell into the bad crowd, and we're gone a lot, I guess, and so we were definitely raised on babysitters. I have a sister who's 2 years younger than me, and I was very protective of her, and I had to protect her from things in life, babysitters, guys, later on in life, that kind of thing. But my dad and mom separated. They got divorced when I was about 9 years old, and my sister was 7-ish. We were 9 and 7, somewhere around there, and it was a nasty divorce. There was court stuff. We were kind of led to take sides, I guess. We've got one family saying one thing about the other, and we're kind of hearing different stories. And my dad saying how, I guess later in, from 9 till about 14, I was kind of not groomed, but I would, because he didn't do it on purpose because he was Protestant, but we had to go to his church. And so
Sure.
I went from, Catholic to Protestant, and he's um, telling us, about the horror of Babylon and all these, non-reasoning, nonsensical arguments against the Catholic Church that I see now. But I was raised Catholic. I was baptized Catholic. Nobody's ever born Catholic. I love how people say that. I was born Catholic. No, you weren't. You were born a sinner, man. You got baptized. But no, I was baptized. I had my first communion. I had CCD, from a very awesome woman named Rose Edick. That was her name. I don't know if she's still alive, but there's a funny story there. Uh, so she was my CCD teacher, and she really formed me in my Catholic faith. It was amazing. Uh, the things this lady taught us, and I was all eyes and ears. It was interesting. I was all ears in the class, and just really took it all in. I learned some sign language with, Jesus loves me, and I can remember doing that. So in my 20s, I decided, now that I'm Catholic, and I'll get to that, because that's a crazy story. How I became Catholic again, I returned to the Catholic Church, reverted. Um, I decided to find her and tell her, hey, guess what? I came back to the church. So I found her, and I called her. And she's an elderly lady at this point, and I said, hey, is this Rose Edick? And she said, oh, yes, it is, And I told her who I was, and she's like, oh, Jason, oh my gosh, how are you? And anyway, we talked back and forth, and I told her how I had ended up. And she said, it shocked me. She goes, oh no, honey, you need to leave the Catholic Church. It's the whore of Babylon. You need to get out of it. Yes. I'm like, what?
What?
Yes.
How many
She
years
said,
later? You said she was your CCD teacher, what, when you were 8,
yeah,
7?
7, 8. So 18, 20, about 20 years later.
Oh my goodness, man.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wait a minute. So I was new back, so I was kind of like zealous. I still am, but I'm more honed and non-judgmental. I'm working on it. But
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. This zeal that comes out, and then you need to temper it or
right,
channel it into the appropriate areas. Yeah.
I was kind of like a stallion that was let out of the gates. But I said, oh no, well, I guess this became kind of a way for me to try to convert you back. And she goes, oh no, no, that's not going to happen, honey. This is the truth. The Catholic Church is wrong, and here's why. And I'm like, none of that's true. And it ended up, I just had to be like, I gotta go. Sorry. And I just kind of hung up on her, and I've never talked to her since. It was weird. But that was the start of many people kind of attacking me for being returning to the Catholic Church. But I don't want
Yeah,
that to be the whole.
well, yeah, I want to frame the
Right.
teenage years, because if your father
Yeah.
was, you were going to the Protestant church from 9 to
Yeah.
14, you said exclusively, right?
Well, yeah,
Or
9.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. What were you saying?
No, no, I was just going to say, so from the time that I don't know, from 14 until into your 20s, what did that look like? Were you going to Protestant and Catholic churches, and how would you overcome hearing such polemics, I guess, over the years, and then what turned that?
Yeah. So when I was 9, they divorced, and I went to live with my mom. We stayed with her for a little while, and then we had like full-time babysitters right after school. We hated it, and if we didn't like them, we got them fired. We were mean. Think of like Mary Poppins before they were nice. The kids, um,
Running,
but
yeah,
much worse.
running away, chasing a kite. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But think 80s and like Def Leppard and all. Anyway, um, I just at that point we had another court hearing, and we had to decide who we wanted to live with. And we were literally taken into the court, the judge's office, and literally my sister and I are sitting there at age what 10ish and 8ish, and he's like, "Who do you want to live with?" And we have to choose a parent. It's crazy, and we chose our dad because we had been accidentally groomed, I would say. He didn't mean to,
Yeah.
towards the Protestant church, and that the Catholic church was wrong. And so, however, they had joint custody, so she got to choose which school we went to for a while. So thank God she did this, looking back, but she forced him to make us go to Catholic school. But mind you, it's right when I'm a Protestant, a new one at an evangelical church, who thinks in his head, you got a 11, 12-year-old who thinks in his head, I hate the Catholic church. It's wrong. They're all going to hell, you know? So now I'm going to a Catholic school in 5th grade and 6th grade. Anyway, I mean, it was crazy. This is how to sum up how I was in Catholic school. I cried every time I had to go to the mass. I hated it. I felt so uncomfortable. But I learned, it's interesting. I learned all the rote prayers that I kind of came back to me later. It's interesting how God frames things, Um, there was a kind nun there who was my principal. Her name was Sister Larita Bintner. And I had gotten in trouble at recess for something stupid. Me, I'm always perfect. And I had to go talk to her, and she's like, telling me all these things I need to do. And, you need to be different and you need to be nicer. I'm like, yeah, yeah. And she goes, you will not say, yeah, you will address us as yes, sister. And I'm like, you're not my sister. You're going to hell.
Oh,
I said that to her. And 2 other nuns who were there, and they were like, oh, I mean, if ever a nun was going to have a heart attack, that was the time, like, oh. So I do want to fast forward real quick. In my 20s, or no, this was in my 30s, we were getting ready to move from Colorado to Southern California. And I decided, you can see a theme here, I want to find her and ask her forgiveness now that I'm Catholic. And I'm like, there's no way she's still alive. She was like 130 when I was in 5th grade. There's no way.
yeah, that's a good guess that she wouldn't be around if she was already
Right?
Yeah.
She was still alive, dude. She
Uh,
was still alive.
You tracked her down.
I found her. I can't believe I found her. It's totally God. And she was in like a nursing home for nuns that had retired. That I don't know if that's a thing, but they just too old to, you know. I mean, she's at this point 320 years old. I don't know, but I found her. And I said, Sarah, I have to go do this. She's like, you go. And so I went to Colorado Springs at this retirement home for nuns and nursing home. And they said, look, they said on the phone earlier, you may not want to come because she's not going to remember you. She has severe dementia, severe Alzheimer's. She is blind. She doesn't remember anything. She barely remembers us. And I'm like, I don't care. She still has a soul. I want to go ask her forgiveness, and tell her I'm Catholic again. And it's probably could be because of her prayers, because she was my mother's teacher, and principal. That's how old this lady was. So anyway, I found her. She's like, the lady told me, prepare yourself because it's going to be rough. She's a lot different, obviously, than she was, so many years ago.
Yeah.
So I walk in and she hears people come in and she's like, who's there? Who is that? And I said, oh, Sister Larita, it's Jason Goodman. And she kind of pops up and she goes, Jason Goodman. Oh, you're Joni's child. I remember you. Yes.
What?
Yes. I'm like, are you? And the nurse is like, oh my gosh, she remembers you. She's like, you were a bit of a firecracker back then. And she started talking about all these things she remembered about me. And I'm like, dang, I must have either a bad or a good influence. I don't know if I really hurt her, but I told her, briefly, I was very, very anti-Catholic for a long time. I just recently returned to the church. and I wanted to ask your forgiveness. And the nurse is crying at this point. And Sister Leah starts tearing up. She's like, "Oh yes, I forgive you, honey, absolutely." And I say, "I can't, you don't know how far I've come to get to here with you." And it was just amazing. And I cried all the way home. I felt so clean. I know I didn't go to confession, but it felt almost like going to,
Yeah.
just kind of releasing. I know it was stupid. I was in fifth, sixth grade, but still saying to somebody you're going to hell that clearly isn't. So I met with the nurses, and I guess I was related to one of them through my mom, and we were talking about, you know, exchanging emails and keeping in touch. And I said, look, I don't know if you can because of HIPAA law, but if she does pass away, can you please just let me know? And like 3 or 4 months later, she passed away. It
Wow.
was, yeah, like I made it so close. Um, so that meant a lot to me. But she was my principal, and that's how I was in grade school. Uh, but flip-flopping to evangelical church now, I went there. I was going to Awana. Have you ever heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh,
It stands for Approved Workmen Are Not Ashamed. It's like a kids club for, if the listener doesn't know, it's a kids club for Protestants, usually in the evangelical church. But it was really good. It actually, God used it to form me because I learned my Bible inside and out. I memorized verses. Um, Interesting, every single week I was considered high boy with my best friend Ben. We dominated everybody on verse memorization. It was, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but like, it's interesting. I see how I am now and how things formed me back then, and why God maybe had me memorize all those verses, for now, to make me a kind of natural theologian, I guess, or
yeah.
apologist.
Yep.
Because I definitely would. I think I'm one. I mean, we're all supposed to be apologists, but I can see how he had a plan for me. I look back and I see that, and like I said, Satan had a plan too, and so that's where Satan comes into the thing. When I was growing up, my mom and dad had a lot of Playboys laying around the house. And I guess looking back, that was the thing you did back then in the 80s, if you were those kind of people. And that's how they got into the wrong crowd. And I gravitated towards finding these magazines around the house. They were just kind of in magazine holders and on tables and just kind of out. And my grandfather on my dad's side he's kind of like, has every magazine you could ever imagine of the Playboy collection. Um, Side note, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, he sent a Facebook thing out to everybody saying, "Hey, which one of you would like my collection of Playboys? I'm going to bequeath it to one of the guys in the family." And I was like shocked, like, what? And he didn't know um, where I'm at in life. But I told my wife, because we were married, I said, I kind of want to get it and then immediately burn it, but have you with me the whole time so I don't get tempted to look at it. And she said, "No, don't do that. Just say no, because it's just a temptation waiting to happen.
Sure.
What if one slips out and ends up in the magazines we have, um, which are Epic Times newspapers, to be honest with you." but um, but yeah, he said that, and I said, "No, I don't want that crap. Just get that, give
Yeah.
it to somebody else." And my cousin got it, and he was all excited, like, "Look I got Grandpa's collection, yeah!" And I'm just like angry because that's what led me into that issue growing up in life. Because of, I mean, it is my fault. I chose to look at that through life, but before I realized it was wrong. But yeah, it's just I was laying around the house, and in fact, I won't say it obviously, but I remember the first image I ever saw when I was like 6 or 7 years old. It's interesting how it gets burned into your mind. And um, even my boys now, I have a 16-year-old and a 15-year-old boys, well, men, and I've raised them with nothing hidden around the house, nothing weird, and I can say that in all honesty. And I've raised them with this saying: is be careful what you see and be careful what you hear, because once you see or hear something, you can't get rid of it. It's burned forever into your brain, and if you're not careful, into your soul.
Yep. And then Satan will bring that up constantly to pester you and harass you. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he did. And my grandparents, you know, my dad and mom would go over to my grandparents' house, and us kids would have to go downstairs and or upstairs and watch Disney movies or whatever. And they were down there, and I never knew what they were doing down there, but they were watching old like Larry Flint videos and that kind of thing. I think that was his name, Penthouse owner,
Oh, okay.
and yeah, all those little old '70s porn movies.
They would
That's
go.
what they would do.
So the kids were in the same house. You're saying,
House,
and it
yeah,
was just
yeah,
what they did. Yeah.
yeah. So I didn't know that until much, much, much later. Um, so anyway, that's how Satan kind of used that in my life to kind of not bring me down because I'm still standing, you know, thanks be to God, but how to kind of hurt me and give me a thorn, you know, in my flesh, unfortunately. And you know, I had lots of girlfriends in high school and or junior high and high school, and now we're talking. I'm about 13 or 14 years old and
Yeah.
going on 15. Um, it was kind of always in my life, and it was. I can see looking back the girlfriends and the pornography. It was clearly because of my mom leaving and abandoning us, and because after we decided to live with my dad, she just was so hurt by it all. She just left, you know, just took off, and it was tough because
When
what's
you
that?
said she passed in '01, right? How
Yeah,
did you see her leading up to that? I'm sorry to, if that's jumping too far ahead, but
no,
curious, like if she up and left, did you see her before she passed?
it's interesting you asked me that. So I didn't want anything to do with her. In fact, there were so many times she said, you know, hey, I want to come see you, and I'm like, yes, finally. And she had something happen. I'm doing quotes with my fingers, you know, something happened where she couldn't see us. And I remember one time I was so angry. I was about 16-ish. I put a hole in the wall with my fist, and I was just so mad that she ditched me again, you know. And you can see that as an older guy now who's I'm deeply Catholic. I see how Satan used that hurt to make things worse, try to make things worse in my life, you know. And but yeah, in answer to your question, about 2 weeks before she passed, I decided that's it. I'm gonna go find her. I haven't seen her for a long time, at hardly at all. I'm just gonna walk into her job, and so I called my sister. I said, "Hey," she was working at Wendy's in Lincoln, Nebraska. She ran 7 or 8 of them at the time, like a district manager. And so I just walked into a Wendy's and saw her in the back, and I walked up. I said, "Hey, can you get Joan Goodman back there?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, hold on." And my mom saw me, and I didn't know. I thought she'd be like embarrassed and kind of run away or something, or not want to see me. She ran up to me, and there was not a place on my face or neck because she's short where she wasn't kissing me. Just covered me in kisses. And I tried to talk through the kissing, you know, she's like kissing my neck and my forehead and my cheek, and oh my gosh, you're here. Oh, and she's just sobbing, you know, and I'm trying to say my planned thing I wanted to say to her, which didn't work out because I'm sobbing. Um, but we eventually sat down, and I just told her, I want to be back in your life. I'm sick of this. I'm, you know, at that point, let's see, 23, in my 30s, early 30s. I just want to be back in your life, and I want to, um, you know, be close to you and get to know you again. And she just, absolutely, yes, I want that too. And I wanted that for a long time. And, you know, your dad kept you from me. And I said, I know. I said, I don't want to get into that because I don't want to take sides again, but um, I do want to be closer to you. So thank God that happened, because if I had not done that and she died, I can't imagine what would have happened. Um,
So two
I don't think, yeah,
weeks later, you said?
2 weeks later, yeah. I was I was engaged to a girl at the time, and I got the call from my sister that she was in the hospital. She had an aneurysm and was kind of just not in a coma. She was there, but she could only move her right hand, and her eyes were closed shut. She couldn't move them or speak. Anyway, Shannon, the girl I was engaged to at the time, we just took off for Lincoln, which I lived in Omaha at the time, and we were at her place, and we just took off, and I got there in about 20 minutes, and it's a 45-minute drive, and blazed into the hospital. And my sister and I spent the whole night with her, off and on, taking turns, and she kept kind of tearing up. You could see tears coming out of her eyes, and she tried to get up and move her body, and they said, "Hey Joan, you got to sit down, you know, or lay down." And then she kind of just lay there, but she squeezed our hands all night. took turns, and that's all she could do is squeeze, and tears coming out of her closed eyes. And so my sister and I just, we talked to her a lot, but we sang her songs up to her death that she sang to us when we were little. And just kind of, and then all of her family, she has 5 siblings, everybody came together. There was at least 15 to 20 people around her bed as she passed. um, but you got to remember, I was very, very anti-Catholic. Oh yeah, I didn't tell you. So I became Protestant. I became a fundamentalist Calvinist, like extreme fundamentalist Calvinist.
In your
At
20s
this, yeah, in my
then?
20s.
Into your 30s?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and no, that's not true. It was in my 20s because I
Okay.
met Sarah when I was 26, 27. So yeah, it was before age 27. I'm sorry if my dates are wrong. I'm trying. Maybe I should have done the math before we got on.
All good. All good.
But
Just say
okay,
you were in your 50s, which is not even
yeah,
happening.
yeah. There we go. I was 85,
Yeah.
but but no, yeah, we went, and so after she, oh yeah, so we're all standing around her, and as she's dying, I'm just, everybody else is sobbing and crying, and I'm not. I'm like, I don't really know her. I'm trying to be strong for my sister, but she's going to hell. In my mind, I'm thinking she's going to hell for eternity. This is insane. My mom, is going to hell. And I just kept saying that in my head. And I went home with Shannon, and she just kind of consoled me the whole way. And I was crying because, my God, my mom is in hell right now, burning for eternity. I know she's not now, but at the time, um, at least I hope. I can't judge either way, really, but
Sure.
I think she's in heaven, But yeah, and so that's where I was around. Let's go back now, to about age 15. My dad got remarried to a nice lady, a good Christian lady, when I was about 15 and a half. We approved of her. She was awesome. They're still married. Um, Her name's Dawn, Dawn. She's awesome. She's my mom. Um, where was I gonna go with that? We didn't get along really at first, but that's because I was 16 or 17. Now that I know, because I have a 16-year-old, um, it's it's I I
Not the
love him very
easiest
much.
age. Yeah, not the
No,
easiest. Yeah.
no, no, and I had a lot of girlfriends, and I can see now why. But some that honestly were very good girls. We just didn't work out. Thank God, because then I met my wife eventually. But um, I had a lot of depression stuff going on when I was a teenager. Um, Sometimes had suicidal thoughts, but nothing big. I know now, looking back, it was because of anger, not having a proper outlet for it. Um, I'm 99% sure that's where Satan kind of set up things with pornography, and being tempted in that area. It brings you down to a level where you have so much shame that you just, why not do that? Just, I'm done. There's no point in living. I get it. I knew I really loved God. I knew he was real. I wanted to serve him with my life, but there was that thing, that monster in my life, and I never got into drinking or drugs or anything like that. Heavily into fitness, ever since my dad introduced me to exercising when I was like 6. So he wasn't all bad. He was a good guy. He taught me the faith, and what I mean by that is the general, like, I love you, Jesus. I want to, follow you with my life. Um, but he sat me down and did the whole spiel about how the Catholic Church is wrong. You need to do the sinner's prayer, which isn't in the Bible, but whatever. Um, and I got baptized in the Protestant church, which is funny because it's not a baptism.
Well,
Looking back,
how old were you when you got
uh,
there?
10. I was around 10.
Okay.
So
And how did you transition from, I thought you had said, I believe you did, evangelical to fundamentalist Calvinist theology? How did that transition happen? Or was that just organic? Like, this church kind of merged with this church, or how'd that all happen?
no, no. So I joined the army when I was 17. I went in between my 11th and 12th grade. It's called split option, basic training. Then you come back and finish high school, and you go finish advanced training for the army when you're 18. Um, so I did that and came back, went to college, and I stayed there for about a year, and then I moved back to Columbus, Nebraska, where I'm originally from. I just missed my girlfriend, I missed life there. So I came back and I met a guy named Seth, who we're still very much best friends. Um, he and I became roommates, and he was going to a church called Platte Valley Bible Church, which doesn't exist anymore. And interesting. And the pastor, Phil, uh, was and still a good friend of mine. He and Seth are the only two people I've retained friendships with since I left the Protestant church I was going to, the Bible church. But he was the pastor there, self-proclaimed, kind of like, hey, I'm the pastor, come to church, you know. And there's about 30 or 40 people there that went, and good people, seemingly good people. But Platte Valley Bible Church was sort of an offshoot of Indian Hills Community Church in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is this huge mega church. The pastor there is named Gil Rue, and his son. Anyway, they started this church a long time ago, and it's like 30,000 people or something like that. It's a crazy huge church, and they have sister churches, you know. And anyway, Omaha Bible Church kind of absorbed Platte Valley Bible Church. And so I just kind of gravitated there with Seth because he was my roommate.
Yeah.
You know, and that church, interestingly enough, Omaha Bible Church, is made up of about 85% former Catholics, which is interesting. So yeah, that's the kind of answer to your question.
No, it's really sad. 85.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So I guess into your 20s, I'm assuming that you just kept digging further and further into a specific theology. Now, okay, this is my question. Were you getting progressively more anti-Catholic in this process, or would you say you hit a plateau and you're just like, okay, did you actively teach against Catholicism, or how did that look?
Well, I knew. Well, I say I knew the facts, which are not facts, about my. How do I say it? I don't want to sound mean to myself, but I guess my ignorant beliefs about what I thought the Catholic Church believed. You know, like we pray to Mary. Uh, the Eucharist is obviously not Jesus. It's just a bread formed from Egyptian sun gods. Yes. Have you heard of Jack Chick?
Oh, of course,
Oh
absolutely.
yeah,
Those are
yeah.
horrific. Some of those, yeah.
Oh yeah. I was the one putting the Death Cookie Chick track into Catholic books at the bookstore.
Are you serious? I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah, yeah.
know people did that.
Yeah,
I heard about guys on street corners handing them out. So
yeah, yeah. That was me. Um, so I did that. But yeah, in college, I was roommates before Seth, actually, with a guy named Todd, who went to this. Now I know it's a cult church, but it's like a church where they meet in the house, and they don't believe they believe music is evil. I never went because I knew it was a cult. But he loved Jesus, you know, and I saw that, and he definitely. That's where I got a lot of my King James Bible training, which is ridiculous. Um, but I did get to read the New Testament 3 or 4 times within a year, you know,
wow.
and really, yeah, really break it down and study it. And by the time I got to Omaha Bible Church later on, I know I'm jumping over the place, but I was like ready to go to Master's Seminary and be a pastor. You know, it just seemed like the thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, I was that into it. But yeah, I was throwing chick tracks at people, literally throwing packs of them at groups like, Jesus loves you, get saved, you know, as we drive by and take off like a bunch of cowards. Um, you know, that was me. But yeah, and it all came to a head though when I met Sarah, my now wife. I was going to Omaha Bible Church. I was working at a place called the Travel Source, which doesn't exist anymore. And they sell timeshare type things. And I saw a cute blonde and decided to talk to her. Her name's, hi, I'm Sarah. And I'm like, you are the most beautiful thing in the world. And so we got to know each other and talked. And she's a very holy girl. She still is very holy. Uh, and I was the one like, hey, let's just kiss a little bit. Let's just do this a little bit more. And she's always like, no, we can't do that. You know, I'm like, okay, kind of bummed out, but thankful, I guess. You know, I knew what I was doing, and I knew as a Christian, you know, you don't do that kind of stuff. But still, there was that temptation that you can see how Satan kind of framed my
Yeah.
whole life with that physical attraction, you know. And so a girl named Jenny at Omaha Bible Church saw that we were kind of paired off at one time, because I told Sarah, come to my church, because she was going to a church called St. James Catholic Church, and she's like, okay, I'll go, but I'm Catholic. And I said, well, thinking in my head, I'm just going to save her from the horror of Babylon and have her come to Omaha Bible Church and get saved and be a Christian, because she's not one, and kind of like what's that called? Dating.
Speed? What are you talking about?
Like where you date non-Catholics in order to save them and bring them
Oh,
home.
I don't know that there's a phrase for that.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what it is. I'm sure people listening are like, it's this. Witness dating. I can't remember, but
Okay.
anyway, Jenny took me aside from a party we were at on a Friday night and said, hey, you're forbidden to date her. Like, I've told the elders, and you can't do this. Like, it's wrong. She's not going to heaven. Like, you need to date a Christian. And but I got mad at her, and I said, well, you don't know her. And I sounded so immature saying that at the time, but when I went to church the next Sunday, I was talking to somebody, and I was thinking to myself, if Sarah isn't a Christian, then who is? Because Sarah's really holy, she's really nice, she's very sweet, she's all got it all together. Um, how can she not be a Christian? Because it says in the Bible, Matthew 5:17, you'll know a Christian uh, by their fruits. I believe it's Matthew 5:17. But yeah, you'll know a Christian by their fruits, the works they do, you'll see that they're a Christian. And it was blatantly obvious with Sarah. But so I started questioning things, and that was the first thing that rocked my boat. The second thing was people in church started telling me, I started finding things out, like one lady said, well, we were talking about salvation, and she said, well, you don't really ever know if you're truly saved. And I'm like, well, but the Bible says we can know by the Holy Spirit, that's his promise, is salvation. She's like, well, we're so fallible and sinful, wretched creatures, you don't really ever know if you're truly saved. And I'm like, what? That's not what we believe. And anyway, so it came to a head because I really liked Sarah, and I just kept questioning things and questioning even my own faith at one point. But thankfully, God was at work, and He had me. It was set, so I had to go some army training for 20 weeks, which means I had to leave Omaha Bible Church. And it was just when Sarah and I were having so many arguments about Christianity, about Catholicism, and I'm like, no, that's not true. You do worship Mary, and that's wrong because it's worshiping idols and all this other ridiculous stuff. And that's not Jesus in the Eucharist. Or the bread. It's just bread. And I got so mad that we broke up twice because of these arguments. But um, I ended up going to training in Texas, and I told Sarah, look, I'm just gonna, I'll agree that I'll take your dumb Scott Hahn books and your stupid Carl Keating books, and I'm gonna tear them apart and show you where you're wrong. And how brazen of me. Who do I think I am? But I went to training, and we talked all the time, and I really did tear those books apart. It was the Lamb's Supper. It was Carl Keating's book, Protestantism and Fundamentalism.
Fundamentalism,
That's it.
yeah.
Yeah, yellow book. And I still have them. And you can see where I just circle, underline, highlighting, writing things in the margins. What about this? What about that? And slowly I started seeing, oh my gosh, this might be true. I think this is the one true church. And so I wrote my pastor, emailed him. Now, mind you, I hadn't really converted in my heart yet, back. I was still very much anti-Catholic. And I wrote him, and I still have the emails. And I said, I got a question. I said, as I read some of the books you gave me, I didn't say it that way, but you gave me to read while I was gone, this big, thick book on Christianity. I'm noticing that all of the early church fathers were Catholic, you know, and so I'm trying to figure out, like, where did something go underground, like you've always said, and then the Protestant church kind of reared up after the Reformation. And he said, oh no, it sounds like you're wanting to be Catholic, and it sounds like you're wanting to be Catholic for a girl, which is totally sinful. And antiquity doesn't always equal orthodoxy, Jason. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's right. That's what he told me.
Yeah.
Which is true. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're not the Catholic Church. um, so I started questioning things, and he eventually said, we went back and forth quite a bit, but I said something in the end, something to the effect of, I'm starting to think that because all the church fathers were Catholic, I'm starting to see how the Eucharist, it might be Jesus in the bread. And because of John 6, around verse 50, and I've read John 6 so many times, Pastor Pat. And anyway, he basically told me, you know what, I'm done with you. I wash my hands of you. I'm done throwing pearls to swine, is what he told me. And you were never saved. You're not a Christian. There's no hope for you. You've lost it. Um, and I said, well, I didn't know what to say, so I didn't respond, but
Yeah.
I got very angry, Um, so I came back and I decided, I talked to Sarah quite a bit, but I said, you know what? The Catholic Church is the one true church. It is. And I was crying and I can't believe this. I believe in purgatory. I get it. I believe all these things. I get it. Um, Mary, I still have an issue with. Not now. At the time, I was saying this to her. Um, and she said, well, you can't be a cafeteria Catholic. You have to take it all or none of it. And you are already Catholic, so you're not becoming Catholic, and so I wanted to marry her, and I didn't tell her this obviously, but I came back from my training, and about a month later, I'm like, in my mind, I said, I'm going to ask her to marry me. This is it. I want to return to the church. I want to get married to Sarah. I love her. She's my best friend. And the next day, I got deployment orders from my reserve unit. They were like going to deploy me 4 days later, like you're leaving for 2 years. Yeah, yeah. So I freaked out, and I told Sarah, and we both kind of freaked out, and I cried a little bit here and there. And I said, I really want to marry you, Sarah. And she's like, well, you're not Catholic though. And I'm like, okay. So I was like, well, I want to be. What do we do?
Yeah.
So we went to her priest, Father Bisbee was his name, and said, hey, this is what happened. And I got deployment orders. I leave in like 4 days. I want to marry her, but I'm not Catholic anymore. I want to return to the church. And he spent like 8 hours. I always joke I had an 8-hour confession with him, but it was more like a confession slash like RCIA, crash course RCIA. And I was married prior to Sarah for 4 months. In that whole life I was living, that worldly life, that's a whole other story.
Sure.
But yeah, was it when I was at Omaha Bible Church, I met a girl, and just through things that happen in life, you make decisions. Anyway, we got married, and so I had that, and Sarah knew about it, and so the priest got an annulment for me in about 2.5 hours. Yeah, yeah,
And you're doing the RCIA crash course. Same.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he spent a lot of time with us, and so I didn't tell you one thing. When we told him everything that had happened, he starts crying, the priest, and we're like, what's wrong, Father? And he said, this same exact thing happened to my mom and dad, almost identical. He was just shocked, like this deployment orders, the former Catholic, all of it. And he's like, you're getting married in the church. I'm going to make sure this happens, And so we got married in 36 hours. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Her her parents drove from Colorado. My parents came. I had some friends come. We had a best man. Maid of honor was her sister. She got a wedding dress in like half an hour for like $45. It was crazy. This Italian restaurant in Omaha called Lo Sole Mio. Her parents called them and told them what had happened, and the lady's like, "Oh, we must have your dinner here," and so they put a little thing, a stand outside, congratulations, Jason and Sarah, and we got a cake and everything in 36 hours. Boom, we're married, and so we had a great reception party at Lo Sole Mio. So anyway, long story short, the next morning in a honeymoon suite, that my commander called me from the reserve unit. She's like, "Hey, is it Specialist Goodman?" I go, "I was a specialist at the time." I go, "Yeah, yeah. What can I do for you, ma'am?" And she said, "Well, there's been a huge mistake. You're actually not going now." Yeah. So
Awesome.
what's that?
I said that is awesome. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
So I freaked out. We always joke because I was in my boxers when she called, and so I freaked out, and I'm like, "Honey, do you want to get something for breakfast before we call your parents?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'll have whatever they have down there." So I run downstairs, and I'm in line behind this old lady, and I've got my plate, and I'm ready to get food, and I look down, I'm still in my boxers. So, I ran upstairs in the hotel, and I got my plate, and I'm ready to get food, and I look down, I'm still in my boxers. So, I ran upstairs in the hotel, and I got my plate, and I'm ready to get food, and I look down, I'm still in my boxers. So, I ran upstairs in the hotel, and I got my plate, and I'm ready to get food, and I look down, I'm still in my boxers. So you know, flashing everybody the whole way up. And I run in and I'm like hopping around like, I was in my boxers. Why didn't you tell me? She's like, you left so quick. I didn't catch. I don't know. We're just freaking out. And to top it off, we call her mom and dad, who are on the other end of the hotel, thank goodness. And they answer, and we told them what happened. And her dad starts sobbing in the background, just sobbing almost uncontrollably. And she's like, Sarah says, well, what's wrong with dad? And he said, her mom said, your father has been up all night long. He has not slept at all with his rosary, praying for Jason to get out of the orders.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So it was just, so life went on, we were married, and God clearly wanted us together, for a reason. And I was Catholic. I'd return home, and my parents thought I was nuts. Oh yeah, my Omaha Bible Church, I lost about 450 friends instantly. Just poof. All these close people that I loved and loved me wanted nothing to do with me. I was ostracized. Now, funny thing, I was gone for so long that I hadn't been there for so long. Okay, Sarah's mom and dad, they like, you got married so fast. We want to have sort of a renewal of vows ceremony in Denver with all of our friends, and everybody Sarah knew from home. So they spent, I don't even want to say the amount of money on a renewal of vows ceremony that almost looked like a wedding. I mean, she had a long train gown, everything, wedding, a true wedding dress, limo, all that stuff, dance afterwards, like a Catholic wedding should be,
Yeah.
and alcohol. But
It's allowed. It's allowed.
yeah, right. Well, up till this point in life, I had actually always thought drinking was a sin, so I never drank. And Sarah's like, "Oh no, you should drink. It's fun, not in a bad way,
Yeah,
It's enjoyable,
it's enjoyable. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and I never did that. So she kind of introduced me to good beer, like really good beer, and so now I really love drinking. I need to be specific in saying that so nobody thinks I'm
Yeah.
like an alcoholic, but because I'm not. But just a good beer, and celebrate that. Yeah. Anyway, that alcohol. But so we had to go to Target to do the gun to register our gifts,
Oh yeah.
and I ran into a couple from Omaha Bible Church, and they're like, Jason? And I go, oh my gosh, how are you guys doing? And we talked a little bit, and they're kind of like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I got married. We're doing I tried to explain it to them, and they said that the famous question that Protestants like to ask you is, well, where are you worshiping? And I'm like, oh no. And I'm still kind of embarrassed, not embarrassed I'm Catholic again, but just kind of like scared, like, I don't know, a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said, well, we go to St. James, and they go, Catholic? And they went from here to yelling at us in the store in minutes. But and they were kind of piecing it together in their minds, and they were yelling at us in Target to the point we just had to walk away. We're like, we gotta go. And like, you're not a Christian. I can't believe this. And you lied to, I mean, all these horrible accusations, and scaring my now wife. She's like, what is going on? And they knew who she was. They had seen her a couple times where I, tried to save her, even though she already is. So that's kind of how it happened. We had to wait a year to go on our honeymoon, which is a whole other. So we had to wait for a year to go on our honeymoon, and in that year, she got pregnant, and about 8 weeks before we went on the honeymoon, she got pregnant. So because we just couldn't afford it when we got married so quickly.
Yeah.
We had no money. I was working for $9 an hour at True Green Camelot, because I was a reservist at the time, and because I didn't start active duty until 2005, and so we eventually got money saved up. We were able to go to Cancun, and we get on the plane. We go down there. The first 3 days were just amazing. It was so much fun. I'd never been to that kind of place before, and then Hurricane Wilma hit us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the largest hurricane in recorded history at the time, and the eye went right over Cancun, destroyed it. And to top it off, to make matters worse, she was pregnant, and she got hyperemesis, which is an extreme form of morning sickness. in Mexico, with very little medical care down there, in a hurricane with 300-mile-an-hour winds. It was averaged, and it was insane. So she almost died like 6 times down there, and through her pregnancy. There was a point where she was throwing up so much she just got emaciated, like starving, and dehydrated so badly that she was literally laying on a. They had moved like 4,500 people to this big expo center with all these like, what are those chairs called that lay down at the beach? The little long chair you lay on. Yeah, chairs.
Cheers. Yeah.
Chairs, long chairs. But but those were our beds and our places. It looked like a concentration camp almost.
Goodness. Wow.
The setup, all these people in one tiny place, so nobody gets offended. It wasn't a concentration camp, um but she was dying literally, and to the point where I just kind of carried her up to the front in hopes that the people in charge would see us, because the military was there, and do something about it, and all
Yeah.
these people gathered around her and started praying over her, and she was just going. And so we got in this van. They kind of threw us in there last minute and drove through this hurricane to this broke down hospital. And the whole way she's like, I just want to go to sleep, and she's kind of dropping her head, and I'm kind of smacking her cheek like, wake up, honey, wake up. And I knew Spanish quite well, enough to have conversations with people at the time. And we got to the hospital, and I told them in Spanish, like, my wife's dying, she needs care. And they would not help her unless the credit card ran. And I kept swiping it, and it wasn't working because of electricity, and stuff. And so eventually we did get it to work, because her mom and dad, we called them, and they gave us their number, and they were able to help us out, and they finally got her in, barely. I mean, got her an IV, got medication to help her, with the hyperemesis. And this is how dumb I was at the time, but I wasn't dumb. I guess I was just out of it and kind of scared. But I looked at the menu of the hospital, and it said $45 for around 45 for each meal. And I'm like, $45? We're running out of money. I don't have that kind of money. And so I grabbed our passports, and I said, I'm going to go walk around downtown and see if I can find food. It's that bad. And the nurse came in, and I'm like, no, we can't afford it. Sorry. And she'd leave. And I was kind of scared leaving her alone in this hospital, because you don't know, it's in a rough part of town. And by then I had this beard, because we had been there for a while, because we became refugees, because it was so bad, all the destruction. And so I put this bandana on, and I looked in the mirror, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I look Hispanic. Like, legit, ¿qué pasó? And so I walk in downtown, and these banditos are coming up with these machetes, like robbing people. And I'm like, God, please protect me. Please protect me. And they walk up to me, they're like, hey, ¿qué pasó, muchacho? They're talking to me, and I say, ¿qué pasó? And we talked back and forth, and I basically told them, no, man, I'm just trying to find some food for my family, and la familia, or, and mi familia. And I told them all this, and I don't speak Spanish that well anymore, so I'm trying to remember what I said. But they walk past me like, oh, okay, hasta luego, see you later. And they walked past me, and they robbed this guy behind me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you, Lord. My heart's racing. Anyway, I go get some food. I come back, and the nurse comes in, and she's like, in Spanish, she said, what's all this food? I said, well, we can't afford, your meals. They're like $45 each. And she's like, no, pesos. It's $4.50 American. I'm like, oh, well, keep that food coming, man.
Your accents are spot on, dude, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So we ate fat that day, I'll tell you what.
Oh my goodness. So how long was she in the hospital? When did you make it back to the States?
About 10 or 12 days later, the US consulate, oh, it was ridiculous. We went back to the expo center, and the second floor was the British people, and we were the Americans. I don't know why they separated us, but anyway, it was. But the British consulate, they snuck in and took all the British people away and flew them out. That, like, by the third or fourth day, we're like, where are they going? What the heck? And the American consulate wanted nothing. The American consulate flew out right when it happened and wouldn't help us. So we were just kind of left. It was crazy. Dysentery broke out. We never got it, thankfully, but like, somebody had the bright idea of ripping the carpets up because it was wet, and it released all these spores, and everybody started getting sick. And So stupid. Um, so Northwest Airlines, who doesn't exist anymore, they decided to fly down and rescue us, but they flew blind with no radar at all because it was all knocked out. And it was crazy because they bussed us to the airport, but then all of a sudden stopped at the airport and we weren't allowed to get out. And these military guys came up, they like didn't surround the bus, but kind of just monitored the bus and kind of opened the window like, oh yeah, hey, what's going on? You know, what's que pasó? And the guy's like, oh, President Fox is a key here or there, a key, I think a key here.
There you go. Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, okay. So the President Fox at the time is just going through the airport, so they had to lock it down. And anyway, we did get on the airplane eventually and barely made it out of there. And she was emaciated at that point, just done. And I was tired. And we got to the hotel in Texas, which Northwest put us up there. Thankfully, we had a beautiful steak dinner, first dinner we had in like, 10, 12 days. And we get home and I immediately got put on active duty in a good way. I had been trying to for a long time and was gone like 2 days later and to training. And when I left, Sarah was still on an IV, but doing okay. And then nobody could get a hold of her for like a day or two. And her mom's freaking out because we're in Omaha and living in her apartment after we married. And her parents are in Colorado.
Yeah.
And so she flew to Denver to check on, or to Omaha to check on Sarah, found her in the bathroom, like almost passed out, collapsed. And so she somehow miraculously got her on a plane with the IV bag. I don't know how, got her back to Denver and they nursed her and took care of her until I could be done with training. And anyway, the rest is history.
The rest is history. Well, we have a few minutes left. I want you to tell me maybe a little bit about the Catholic journey. I mean, from that point to now. I mean, clearly it seems like all that memorization from early on was, like as you said earlier, was very helpful. And then were you, I'm assuming, able to defend the faith against some of the attacks over the years, the fundamentalist attacks, or whoever else was coming after the faith? Or how have you been able to utilize that upbringing?
Yeah. So we went to Southern California for 5 years, and I didn't really do much there. I became a Knight of Columbus, but really there wasn't a lot of I don't know. Guys were weird. There's a lot of walls up naturally with people in California. I don't know. We went to a great Catholic church, had great friends amongst the military people. But when we went to Hawaii, we transferred there for 5 years, which was beautiful. That was a great time. Albeit a couple things that happened for another story maybe. But when we got there, we started going to the Catholic chapel on post there, on the Army post at Fort Shafter. And I just noticed after going there for a while, there really wasn't a lot of things for men, but there was a Bible study and I went to it. I was kind of new. This kind of sums me up at this point, many, many years later as a Catholic, still zealous, but kind of like we said in the beginning, honed in a way, in more loving. But I went to my first or second, maybe second Bible study on Saturday morning with the Catholic guys and fellow Catholic guys. And there's a guy teaching everybody and he's kind of talking, and mind you, I'm new. Okay. He goes, he's talking about Genesis and Adam and Eve. And in the middle of a sentence, he goes, yeah, because Adam and Eve weren't real people. They were just, and he went on to talk about him. And I'm like, question. That's not true. I know it's not a question, it's a statement, but that's not true. And he's like, well, yeah, it is. They weren't real people. They were just kind of metaphors. And I'm like, no, they were not metaphors. They were real people. They existed. And he's like, I'm like, okay, you're speaking heresy. And the guy who brought me is like, Jason, shut up, dude. Just stop. You're new, man.
Yeah, give it a few weeks, then bring it up. Yeah.
Right. I'm like, no, I'm not going to calm down. Like, this is ridiculous. And he said something else even worse. I'm like, okay, you're a heretic and you need to stop. You shouldn't be teaching this. He's like, whoa, who are you? I'm like, I'm Jason Goodman, dang it. So I said, you know what? That's fine. You can keep talking. Next week, I'm going to study and I'm going to show you how you're mistaken, unfortunately. I mean that in love, brother, but, Adam and Eve were real people, and I'm going to show you through scripture that they really were real people. So, Eddie, that next week, I tore apart everything. I ordered books off Amazon, got them quick. I was talking to my priest. I was talking to some friends. I'd been friends with Dallas Carter for a little bit, and I called him, talked to him, a few other people, and I came prepared and ready. I had notes, I had books underlined, just like I told you about the Carl Keating books, but now
Yeah.
it's for a good thing, you know?
Yeah.
And the dude left the church. Yeah, he just left.
Handle the objections you're saying?
Yeah, no, he wasn't even there. He just, they go, I don't know how to tell you this, but he and his family just left the church. They're gone. I'm like, that coward.
Oh my goodness, Jason, come on, man.
Like I wanted to play. I'm kidding.
Yeah, no. It's fascinating to talk about that when you bring up objections and in this sense admonishing someone, you know.
Yeah, I was so ready, and I'm like, oh. And then my buddy's like, well, all your studying you did probably wasn't for nothing. I mean, you learned a lot, didn't you? I'm like, oh yeah, I learned a ton. Um, so that group eventually died off, and there was no men's group for a long time. And then COVID hit in March of 2020, and I said, God, we need a men's group. We really do. I don't know any of the guys here really. I know a couple of them, but so I started a men's group. I asked the priest, can I make an announcement and start a men's group? And he's like, yeah, that's fine. And so I made an announcement, and I told him, I'm forming a men's group. I want to do a Catholic men's group. We're going to start right off the bat with Into the Breach. I felt that'd be a good topic to start,
Yeah,
you know.
very good.
And well, it was before all the videos came out and all the fun study guides. I had to like write one myself. And so start with one other guy named Rob, who is one of my best friends now. And he and I kind of started the podcast, or not podcast, the men's group. And we met on Zoom because of COVID, you know, and then other guys came on. And before you know it, you know, a year later, we've got like 26 guys in the men's group. And yeah, I mean, one night we're hanging out, and we're like, I go, hold on, we don't have a name for the group. And they're like, oh, well, let's just think of one real quick. So we kind of came to the conclusion it's called Brothers in Faith. I thought that'd be kind of cool. So yeah, it's called Brothers in Faith. It went on for that next almost 2.5 years before we moved back here to Colorado. And in that time, we did Into the Breach. We did Be a Man by Father Larry Richards, which was awesome. And so many women in the church. It was interesting. Every Sunday I did an announcement, and slowly all these guys started coming on, and wives were like, you got to do that group. You got to do that group. And Jackie Henderson, one of my good friends' wives, Chris Henderson, his wife Jackie had to do an announcement for me. And it's funny, she just was like, I've never ever seen a men's group like this. The way Jason does this, the way the guys do this, the way they, because we would do the study, and then we'd have the drink of the day by Michael Foley's book, Drinking with the Saints.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would mix it in front of them and make it kind of fun and read the saint of for the drink of the day. And we sit around and have cigars and have a little scotch and whiskey. And I love scotch, by the way. And sip it and talk all night till like 2 a.m. And it was great. And
So that
we got
model was
really,
working really well. Yeah.
yeah, it was. And then the Knights of Columbus caught on, and so they asked me if I would do a statewide conference for all the Catholic men on all the islands for Into the Breach for a whole year, meeting once a month from 2021 through that whole year. And so every month Dallas would open up for me, Dallas Carter, and I would lead all the men across the islands in a Into the Breach men's conference, you know, once a month.
Beautiful.
And yeah, and then God inspired me to start a podcast, and so
What is
now I
the
have
podcast,
that.
by the way? When did you start that? Just recently?
No, in February of 2021 I started it,
Okay.
and it's called Talking with a Good Man. So that was kind
With the good
of
man.
yeah. So I will say, if people are going to look it up, you're going to notice there's like a point where it cuts off for a long time.
Yeah.
So I started it, I did it. It was awesome. I had a lot of cool guests. I didn't know you at the time, or I would have had you on it, but I started it, and then I had a crazy idea of doing a special Lenten series called the Screw Tape Letters Lenten series is what I call it, just simple name. Basically, I figured out if I read a Screw Tape letter every day during the week through Lent, I'll get through all 31 letters in the time of Lent,
Sure.
weekends off. So I started pulling guest speakers out of my rear. I got Jim Beckman, Chris Stefanik, all these people are like, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it. Sure, you bet, you bet. And sometimes I had to do the commentary, but it was a cool setup. I just would open up, I'd pray, I would read the Screw Tape letter, and then I would do a commentary by me or by a special guest, and then end with the drinking with the saints
Great.
drink of the day. I'd read it, and I got Michael's permission. He gave me express permission in my podcast. And then it would all end with a sort of silent retreat I would offer the Catholic guy or whoever's listening,
Yeah.
while my priest would sing Adoro Te Devote at the end. And
Beautiful.
after the Screw Tape letters, I just kind of was so burned out from doing it that I just stopped. And we had a lot of bad things happen in Hawaii. The Navy dumped 20,000 gallons of jet fuel into the water system in Hawaii by accident.
Oh dear.
And yeah, so when that happened, everybody got sick. We got sick. We lost a pet. My wife got sick again after all this. And so we barely made it out of there. And now we're home, and everything is fine. But I really, Dave's been inspiring me to keep going with my podcast. So I'm going to start doing that.
Good. And I think I've said that to other people. I'm like, just keep going. I mean, all of
Yeah.
us kind of try to encourage each
Yeah.
other. Thank you for that story, my friend. That was great.
Sorry it took so long.
A lot of lows, a lot of highs. But as I tell everyone, yeah, please, when these resonate with you, please share them and continue to keep praying for all apostolates, small or large. And again, I want to thank you, Jason, for your witness and for staying the course. And I do see it in you that you have that hunger and that fire that the church sorely needs. So everyone, thank you. Until next time, take care and God bless.